the power. Awesome. Status updates.
Dan and I are still working on a default process. Most of you joined the meeting yesterday. We really hope to finish it either today or tomorrow. And that it won't be like last week that we said the same. It will be actually, we'll actually finish.
I don't have much to share in by way of, contributed PRs. Just been spending some time doing reviews, and I hope to share maybe today the work that I did last week on the refactor.
Similar story for me. I haven't done much this weekend in terms of contributing PRs, but I've got at least one in flight and some comments on another that I'll probably take a look at either tomorrow or early next week to get those pushed through. I think we're waiting on the spec PR still for one of them, so it's in like a draft state, I think, to get the order toggle from the layers directory. And it's got 2 votes. I think it needs 3. So I guess I don't know how to shepherd that along. Maybe I'll mention it today in working group.
I think I might be one of the people holding it up. I can take a look at that today. I also don't have a lot of updates. As I warned you all, I've been working on other things, but I'm almost done digging myself out from under the pile of other things I need to do. So I should be more available in coming weeks.
In response to all y'all's feedback from the Windows SID RFC, I was poking around at how to implement run as and ensure ownership and those functions that aren't implemented in Windows yet, and have some interesting discoveries along that path. But it does look like it's going to be feasible. And thank you all again for your questions in the RFC. It's really helped. That's all I got.
All right. I guess moving on to release planning. Well, I think much has changed from last week, but do we want to talk about it, or should we proceed as we did before?
I'm fine with proceeding.
I feel like we could skip it this week.
Cool. So then moving on to needs discussion. There's nothing there, so I think we could, unless anyone has any late breaking to throw out, move on to RFCs. And there are 2. One's an FCP, the other one's Micah's RFC that we discussed before. I guess don't need to dwell there. All right, so next on the agenda, we have old Buildpack APIs that implements new features should be warn, fail, ignore, or override.
Actually, I put this a few days ago, but then we already discussed it on Slack. It relates to the default process. So in case an all Buildpack add the default equals true, we decided that we're going to have a warning and also override it and set it to false. So a few days ago, I put this, but I think that now we know the answer. Okay, great. We can move on.
I think to just, it might be helpful for us to kind of like extrapolate and articulate what our guiding principle is in situations like this, because I could be wrong, but I think we have some inconsistencies already where, you know, sometimes we just ignore, like I think profile D, if you old build pack contributes one, or I can't remember, but it's like some cases we just silently proceed as if they didn't do anything, and other times we might even fail. So it would be helpful to nail it down so we just do the same thing every time.
I love the idea of warn and override in case we need that. I don't think we should fail if we didn't fail before. And yeah, maybe there are a few places that we need to fix. I mean, if this is what we're going to do starting from now, but I think it's more important to remember this, I mean, from now on.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think as long as we make a decision here, it seems like the best path forward. Yeah, I wonder if there's any places we're like picking up new features and processing them, even though they're on the old API version. Like you said, now, like, is someone emitting a profile D from like Buildpack 0.3, and is it getting executed or something? Like, you know, do we have all the proper guards around already?
I think we've done every permutation of the options for the least possible consistency. I know some we've just respected, even though it's not included in the old API, just to be convenient to people because it's a totally additive feature. But I don't think that that's the right thing to do. I like the warn idea. I'll make the devil's advocate argument just so we've thought about all the cases. I feel like one could make an argument for do nothing and ignore it silently, because if someone upgrades, they don't want their behavior to change, right? If they've upgraded a lifecycle, but they haven't upgraded the API, and like getting a new warning is a type of behavior change.
Yeah, I think my favorite is actually just doing nothing, just pretending it doesn't exist, because it's kind of like parsing different schemas of an API or something, right? Like, just because you didn't pass in these new optional fields doesn't mean it's invalid. Or I guess you're passing in new fields that are going to be ignored. So I guess in that case, they would have had to have modified their build pack, right, to get in this situation. So I don't know.
I'm just afraid that Buildpack authors will see, I mean, we'll see that their Buildpack have, I mean, for example, in our default process case, they will see, okay, I have default equals true. I mean, they will kind of forget that they are supporting like the old API, but they'll wonder, why is it not working for me? So this is why I'm like, maybe we should warn, but I totally understand. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure, because I agree that we don't want to change anything when someone just upgrade lifecycle and doesn't upgrade their buildbacks. Anyway, we need to override it in this case, but yeah, about the warning, I'm not 100% sure.
That's why I'm torn as well. I can definitely see that point. Does anyone else have a opinion between the two or want to weigh in here?
I like being more explicit. It seems like a user-friendly, hey, you're probably doing something you didn't intend to, like, take a look. I don't think it hurts anything.
Should it be like a common error code of like, you know, you've provided inputs that are not valid for this build pack version, or is it specific to like you've done default and that is not valid? Like, how? I'm just wondering, like, you know, because in some cases, I guess if a build pack's emitting files in profile D, we're not, or some future folder that we're not processing today, we're not going to go like look at all the files in that folder and be like, hey, look at these files for this version that you're not, you know, you've put files here for a version that you haven't determined to to be your version of Buildpack API. Like, I don't know, like I can see it. It's easy for like a TOML because you can do a kind of a schema validation and like throw up a good error message, but I think it's less desirable in the case where they're emitting files all over the file system that you might have to go check for.
Yeah, I don't think it's an error code, right? We're going to return error code 0 because it's a success when it's just a warning. I think we also have to be careful with things like new TOML files to make sure that, so for example, like we added build TOML, right, in a new API and we check it. I think it would be wrong, or in some ways you have to be careful because you could easily imagine adding logic to check for build TOML and then warning if it's passed in an older API. But in an older API, you could have a layer named build that had a layer TOML named build TOML. So when it comes to keys in a file, it's pretty straightforward. But when it comes to the existence of files, like Jesse was saying, it's a little bit trickier. But it sounds like maybe we want to just go ahead with the warning as our philosophy here. And just keep in mind that we have to be careful about some cases. It might be something worth bringing up in a working group just because it sort of affects a broad range of people who use the lifecycle. And if someone had a really strong opinion, it'd be worth hearing.
I like that idea. I was gonna quickly capture just so we all remember what we said. So like gently, so ignore, right? Not fail. When appropriate, warn. And then ask and work. Cool. If there's nothing more on this topic, should we continue to Windows quirks?
So as I want to do, I was playing around with the Windows implementation, discovered something that I feel kind of bad for missing in that during the build phase, everything is still running as administrator because Windows isn't actually dropping privileges. Don't quite know how I missed that, but everything obviously works. The build packs that we had at least made to exercise this were apparently fine running as administrator. So we just didn't really have something that exercised the need to have a lower privilege user. So as I was going through and validating specifically questions that Emily had thrown in there in the RFC around whether we have enough inputs to properly drop privileges, I went ahead and just tried to put through a mock implementation for a run as that does drop privileges. It does seem like it's going to be feasible for Windows. I'll spare you some of the crazier details, but I was kind of wondering, and thank you, Jesse, too, for answering the question. I just was going to dig a little bit deeper into the preparer model. Is the expectation for a preparer is it's going to be running in creator as another another phase, all executed the same binary? Is that the case?
So to set the stage, prepare has not formally been RFC'd and approved, I don't think. And even if it was, I think in Steven's mind, prepare is an optional thing. Maybe creator does it, but like prepare would be responsible for processing maybe extension things like Project TOML. But we are proposing moving analyzer before detector. But prepare itself, I don't think is intended as we know it today as being required. And thus, we probably can't rely on it to do anything that you're maybe thinking about doing up front, unless there's a good need, and then maybe prepare can be not optional and do some other things.
Yeah, that makes sense. I bet it would probably be like an RFC on top of RFC to to add more stuff to prepare eventually. Okay, so then to answer my question, Lisa, like we need a pretty extensive run as implementation. That is almost equivalent to what happens on Linux. Beauty of Linux is that the syscall to switch over to the other user is pretty complete, but Windows, you kind of have to piece together every single piece of that of the result of that Linux syscall to get the equivalent behavior. You have to switch over, impersonate the other user. You have to drop your privileges that the administrator had before. You got to change environment variables and stuff too. But that's good context. And as was mentioned too, we got to change privileges on the sockets or do all the socket connections beforehand. So yeah, all that should still work. I think it'll also let us remove some of the for Windows, at least, we create one-off container to fix volume permissions prior to running the lifecycle, and I think we'll be able to get rid of that if we have a proper run as implementation there.
Yeah, because I think Lifecycle does that already, right? So it will hopefully fall into the common code path. Like it already fixes permissions today if you run as administrator.
Right. Actually, it reminds me, it's that second function that's inside of there, the ensure ownership. Yeah, thanks. That's good background. I think that answers my question. I'll keep plodding along to see if I can get something equivalent there. But it does seem like it's going to be feasible. So it's a light at the end of the tunnel. I think that was all I had for that.
I'd love to kill the troning stuff, which I feel like should be feasible. Like one of the only problems that happens is when at one point we ran certain phases as root. There was sort of like a migration issue where we had to chone things because we created volumes with the wrong permission. But that was so long ago that I think we can safely tell people that if they run into that, just delete the volume and bust your cache. That doesn't really worry me anymore. The thing that worries me is that there are certain mount points that sometimes aren't created in the builder image. And then depending on where they are, it creates volumes that are unreadable right out of the gate. But I think if, when this builder spec lands or something we can put into the platform spec, if we required that on the base image, sort of the directories already existed with the right permissions, like whatever CMB cache there is, if you're going to use it, it has to already exist and things like that. We could get rid of the troning stuff, which would make the lifecycle simpler. But I don't think we should do it now, just sort of like a long-term thought that's been lingering in the back of my mind that I wanted to share as a potential path forward to make some of this stuff easier.
Yeah, I would agree from the platform's perspective that if there was a contract of very specific permissions set for certain directories, it should be the platform's responsibility and not expected that the lifecycle mutates those things, because I think right now there's a higher potential of an issue if it modifies something to an unexpected state, right?
Yeah, it'd be much better to get rid of it. Like, I know why we did it at the time, but I don't love it. It'd be nice to get to a world where it doesn't exist.
I'll throw in, like, for what it's worth, the choning part of the Windows implementation will probably be the easier part. And maybe even, I don't know how y'all would feel, but I might deliver that independently of the run as. Because it would let us, it would speed up Windows a bit, and that it would get rid of one extra container that runs before. But yeah, I might ping y'all if that actually seems feasible. See what you think.
All right. I guess we can move on. We have one more item on the agenda, which I was gonna hopefully take us through the refactor PR that I put up, so that it's easier to get feedback and also just kind of sanity check what I did. Share my screen unless there's anything, because this might take a little while, unless there are any other like quick items to discuss first. I was a little late in joining, and I know we were all in the working group yesterday, but congratulations, Jesse.
There is something that we wanted to talk about, the validation process, right? I mean, if someone put a PR, who is, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Now you brought this up, so maybe you would like to introduce.
Oh yeah, this is relating to a conversation that we had in our CND contrib at VMware stand up today. You know, regarding the validation that we do for PRs, like, you know, I know for some more complex features, we might actually do a pack build with like a dev version of the lifecycle to exercise certain features and really get the user experience, you know, testing covered. And I had this question of like, who's responsible, right? Like, you know, does it like the person submitting the PR, are we kind of asking them to do a little validation first, or is it the person approving the PR, or, you know, where do we do that validation, and who's ultimately responsible? I think Javier had shared some really useful thoughts there as well, but it'd be good to circulate here too. Go ahead, sorry.
Is there an expectation that I regurgitate what I said?
Yes, please, for those of us who missed it.
Yeah, so this is, you know, strictly speaking from my experience on PAC, and kind of, I guess, maybe more or less the expectation that I would think would be standardized within the open source community, is that a lot of that really hinders and is more or less the responsibility on the maintainers, right? And how adverse they want to be to like essentially the risk assessment made by the PR. So you could think about the individual PRs, if there's a minimal change that in that particular case, the test, the user acceptance test could be kind of overlooked. But then in cases where, you know, it's a more profound change, it again kind of falls on the maintainer to really understand that if it goes untested, that there could be more of a potential for an issue to arise. One of the things that I mentioned that we did in PAC that was helpful to this particular process was that we added a section in the PR template for the user to provide the before and after outputs. And that allows, you know, me as a maintainer to be able to see exactly what sort of testing they've done beforehand, to at least get a better understanding of whether there's additional edge cases or use cases that weren't tested that probably need to be tested, right? To get a better understanding of, again, what the risk is of merging this in. But again, kind of going back to the principle that it's really the maintainer's responsibility to, when they click that button, to really accept that ownership of the risk.
I agree with most of it. It's, first of all, it's your responsibility. I mean, Natalie, of course, it's you. I'm kidding. But I think that
The answer isn't contributor maintainer, it's Natalie. It's Natalie's responsibility.
it's not me. It's not me. First of all, it's not my responsibility. I'm kidding. Anyway, I think that whoever puts the PR, it will be great if they'll run some acceptance. I mean, it's not acceptance test. I mean, manual testing of the actual thing. Again, it depends on the PR itself. But for example, with the default process, we're going to run some tests. And I think it's very important to put like in the PR itself what we did, because So the maintainer who is going to merge it doesn't have to rerun all the steps, or it will be at least very clear what they need to do, and they will not need to like start thinking how to validate this PR. So
Yeah, I totally agree with that, right? I think the
Yeah.
people, especially in this SUM, should be able to help and contribute to the testing aspect of it, and in some words, show their work, right? I think my concern and the reason why I kind of left it a little bit ambiguous is because I don't think that you could expect other contributors that are not in this room to be able to really comprehend the impact and the sort of testing that is involved. And to set that sort of expectation could be, quite detrimental to contributions.
I was thinking that because even compared to pack, it can be a little bit hard to validate some of these changes. Like if you're adding a new feature to a new platform API, but no one's written a platform that uses it yet. Like, sometimes they go hack changes into pack to really test something out, or run things in a container, but it's a little laborious. So while I like the idea of putting some of these questions in the template, like creating a PR template, because first of all, we don't have one, and like maybe putting a prompt in there, I think maybe in the lifecycle should be more open-ended. Like, what, if any, validation have you done outside of the tests contributed to the code? Just like give people a place to put what they've done so we know how much is left to do.
Yeah, I think that also help if we get an outside contribution, us like be able to replicate what they're doing to test it, right? Because sometimes it's really hard to understand what they're going for, even with the code there. And so it'd be nice to know, like, okay, they created their own lifecycle and mounted it in and ran these steps and loved the result for some reason, right? And so it'd be good to understand and get a bootstrap of how to get to where they're at to test the things you might have questions about.
I like this idea. Does anyone want to take the action of setting up a template? If not, I can add it. I'll do it. Like we don't really use this feature of adding these things, but I'll try. Assign. There we go. Did anyone want to take the ask in working group?
I'm not sure that I'll go to the working group today, but if I do, I don't mind doing this, or we can keep it for next week.
Awesome. All right, I'll assign it to you.
Yeah, I've already wrote it for myself to do this.
All right. In my case, I can do a quick share of my refactor. Let me pull it up and oh no, my GoLand is quitting because I'm not on the VPN, so I have to do some stuff. Here, let me paste the link in our chat. You'll see that there are like 100 changed files, so I was kind of thought that it would be beneficial to talk through in this meeting.
Where did you paste the link?
Oh, in that just now.
Got
Do you want to share your screen while going through the code?
Yeah,
or-
yeah. I'm gonna.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get onto the VPN. Oh, oh no. Okay. Here. now Goland is happy and I can check out my chore. So I guess I'll just preface this with we're hoping to get this accomplished, this release cycle, because we think it will make it easier for stack packs to land. And let me share. So I can, and I wonder if maybe it makes sense to kind of like toggle back and forth between these two. Maybe not. In the last release, we had done a fair amount of work to pull Buildpack TOML into its own kind of file within the lifecycle package. And a lot of the build related code was put there so that an individual Buildpacks build could be unit tested. And the result of that build could be faked when we're kind of iterating over many Buildpacks. And so the bulk of the work for this PR was really to do that for the detect phase. And I guess I'll just go, yeah, maybe it makes sense to just go here. And if I do this, compare, easier way to do this, but there's a lot of changes. I guess so for me, I'm trying to find the place where I pulled this out. We used to have all of these methods that lived on the structs. Oh, and I'm confused because, wait, where's name? Oh my God. Here, okay. So you'll notice like we had order, detect, group, detect. That was very difficult because it meant that all of the code related to detect really needed to be in the same package. So the biggest change I would say in this refactor is moving that code to be more independent and allowing for certain. This is really confusing. Sorry, this is not helping me. Sorry. Allowing for them to be kind of composed independently. So I don't know. Is this making any sense? What's the best way for me to proceed?
I was wondering if we want to look at the Go doc, sort of just to look at the high level interface rather than looking at the changes.
Sure.
You see Go doc for a branch? I think you can, right? Let me try to do this. Hold on. One second, please.
Yeah, I think it was starting to make sense when you were talking about showing all the methods that live off the strut, and I'd kind of like to see where those methods ended up and sort of, how how much more composable they may or may not be now in their new spot, whatever that means,
Mm-hmm.
That'd be cool.
Sorry, my attempt to see the Go doc for the branch didn't work. I'm not sure why. Let me try this one more time. Can you do this on the Go doc site? There must be a way, right? For a specific branch. Like I know you can't do axe. That's not a thing in URLs. Is there a...
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Package.
Does not support that.
This was in 2016, but yeah. Oh, you can publish a tag, I guess.
Yeah, that's too bad. I feel like it'd be interesting. Like, I want just the interface, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry for that distraction. Go on.
I think that's a good place to jump in. What was Jesse's suggestion? I think maybe just looking at the new package, and then we could kind of back out to like what the changes actually were. I guess I'll just start at the highest level with the descriptor, and I kind of renamed some stuff to make it, not stutter and stuff, but this is all could be changed. So this is kind of representing like the Buildpack TOML file, and if it's a meta Buildpack, then it will have an order within it, and so this is just kind of moving all of the structs into one place that might be referenced from the TOML. And then build.go is really containing all of the stuff that used to live in Buildpack TOML in the lifecycle package. It really was just like a copy paste to move it over. And the primary method here is the build method on a single TOML file. The detect is very similar in that it only has a detect for a single build pack. All of the other stuff, the methods that used to live on the struct are still in the lifecycle package. And that is, I kind of made these like detect order, detect group. That's really just pulling them off the struct and putting them on this detector thing. The detector is initialized with a detect config that it passes. So maybe it makes sense to split these. When it calls detect on an individual build pack, it'll pass that config in. Oh, goodness, sorry. Am I looking at the same? Nope, here. It'll pass that detect config to the individual one. And then it also has this thing called a resolver, which is really just containing all of the logic that has to do with log aggregation and plan resolution, which really sounds like two responsibilities. And so I kind of, could be further decomposed. But for now, this actually, it lets the tests mock certain stuff out that was like before needed to be fully implemented in our fixtures. So I can show the tests. The tests are actually like a significant amount of the effort. And so maybe just to remind everyone who didn't work on the detector test recently, we have these, we had these fixtures, which is like a bunch of build packs that all referenced each other and was used to implement this sort of like crazy chain of resolution. And I'm trying to find it just to show like, yeah, all of these like test data by ID, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, which is now it's possible to represent that relationship in our mocks. So if I go here, and I'm not sure if this is honestly better, because you'll notice that like, okay, here are all the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I can now declare in the test that, E actually is A, F, and B, A is an individual build pack, F has C, G, and D, which I like because it's right here in the test. I can see all of the relationships, but it is quite a lot of, it's a lot of expect calls, and it's kind of not clear like where's the setup and where's the test. The test is really on this like resolver, like, okay, when I throw an order with this structure added, the first group of build packs, to complete their detect, for which I'm going to then check all their exit codes, is going to be A, C, and B. And then, more stuff happens, and then I'm going to call resolve on A and B. And this used to be tested by looking at this huge log output, right? A, C, and B, then A and B, then A, C, D, and B, which is now being tested instead of actually calling detect on these fake build packs. I'm testing it by asserting on the interfaces. And it took me a really long time to write this. So I don't know, I mean, this may be a little brittle, right?
Where's the Buildpack store passed into? Is it when you stand up the resolver or something?
Is passed into the, right now is passed into the detector.
Okay, so when you set up the detector, that's where your like mock Buildpack store is, or whatever. Okay. Or
Yeah,
your Buildpack
yeah,
store
this,
that contains mocks.
yeah.
It feels way less brittle than the current log one for moving stuff around.
Yeah.
That seems definitely true to me. I'm less familiar with doing Go mocks like a ton, but I think it's easier for me to get used to that than it is to understanding like how all these build packs relate to each other and like trying to keep that in my head every time I come back to these tests. So I like them being in the test. I think we could probably work around making it easier to mock and things like that at some point. Have some default setups that we use in a lot of places or something to make it easier to read and grok, but I like it.
I like it too. I think it's a big improvement that we can test an individual detect, right?
Yeah. One place that I direct your attention to in looking through this is the resolver. Sort of, as I mentioned, kind of feels a little funny in that it's responsible for aggregating logs from all of the, from a group, right? I'm going to aggregate all the logs together. And so there's tests around like, this is output at info level versus debug. And it's kind of really handling that piece. But then there's also stuff like, all right, well, let's try to resolve a build plan, and it's kind of doing that piece of work as well. Which it kind of reads okay. So I mean, I'd be open to reworking it as well, but maybe it makes sense to just look at the high level, right? We have these detect and resolve at the top level, and detect's really responsible for like orchestrating the build packs and executing them in the right order. And so actually in this setup, it gets a mock resolver, right? So that's the whole point, right? To be able to assert on what the resolver gets called with and when. But then here, the resolver really just, this is the test on the real one. And it has these output assertions as well as build plan assertions.
So you said the resolver, I know it takes in a log handler. It also, does it emit a build pack plan, like at the end, like a plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
It emits the plan back to the detector. And so that's why, in mocking this resolver, I guess for this test, you can, maybe not this test. The one that's interesting is the conversion of the, I mean, I don't know, maybe this should be the responsibility of the resolver, but like I mocked that the return value here was a specific, life cycle build plan. And then with, certain
Gotcha.
characteristics of.
And you're resolving test or making sure that those build plans are being created the right way.
Yes.
Like, I know you're talking about how it's awkward to test log in the middle of resolving, but honestly, this all used to be tested in one go with like every permutation of it, like probably some of those not tested because it was hard to decompose the combination. So I feel like this is definitely a big improvement to at least separate these two. And we'll worry about logs some other time.
Yeah.
I have a question. I think you already said that, but what was the reason for doing all of this? In addition to, make the code clear and more testable. I remember that you said something about stack packs. So can you please elaborate on this?
I can give some context too, because I think I pushed this a little bit.
Sure.
Testing the use of the interface we had was already complex, and there were a lot of permutations of what could happen. With stack packs, it's only going to get more complex, right? To the extent where I feel like our current organization was like at the limit of becoming hard to maintain, and adding all the complexity of stack packs in there, I think would have broken it and made us want to refactor. It would either make for really complicated tests or make us want to refactor. And I don't like to set things up so that when stack packs comes in, we can just look at the stack pack changes without having to look at stack pack changes plus a huge refactor, or stack pack changes plus incomprehensible tests.
Yeah, I think that's true. I don't know if you've seen the draft pull request that like Joe started and I worked on a bit that was doing stack packs. You'll see some of the detector and detector test is probably where you'd want to focus your energy, looking at some of the stuff that sort of happened, because it was so hard to, detect now was emitting multiple files, right? It emits the order that we emit today, or the groups that we emit today in the plan, but now I need to do multiple of those. And so it meant that you sort of had to do this major refactor where you had to have a result. And so like the resolver kind of breaking that out into its own sort of ability to, it would just be a lot clearer, I think, and easier to see those changes. So I think it does make sense to me, at least, having gone through this once.
I think part of the, review process, or like the checking of what I've done here will involve like looking at the tests how they were before, and I guess just confirming that what we're testing now is equivalent. And I think there are some particularly involved tests that became, 2 or more smaller tests. I can try to find examples just to kind of guide everyone's eye, I suppose.
One thing that like the resolver here, it returns back like a group and then a collection of build plans or whatever it is, build plan entries. I kind of wonder if we should start working towards having like a single result set that like the commands themselves operate on, so that you can sort of have additive changes, like an additional group, like a root privilege group or whatever it's going to be for stack packs, right? Because otherwise I think it's still potentially going to explode. Like this resolve statement that's in here, it's going to end up resolving to like group and then stack pack group and build plan and stack build pack plan group. So I'm not sure. Maybe that's okay. I don't know. I know result objects can kind of be hit or miss for some folks.
I want to say if it fails to resolve, then the return value for the group doesn't matter, right? This is
right. I'm saying in like a future stack pack world, like it would return 2 groups there, like one group and then another stack pack group, and being able to like assert those independently and mock those might be a little easier than like them being separate parameters in a single return.
Mm-hmm.
Because it did make refactoring quite hard to like turn what was a 2 return value into like a 5 return value or something. It's like, oh man, if this was a result object, then it introduced another class of bugs there, right? So I mean, like
I like result objects. I feel like once you have more than 3 return values, then it's time.
So I'll just note that whenever this does get merged in, it's going to be a really fun merge conflict too. I know, Jesse, you had the same problem with the stack pack.
Oh yeah, stack pack. This PR is abandoned. It's just here for
Yeah.
reference. There's no way I'm bringing it up to date as is.
I've already. I'm gonna update this, Yael and Dan, with your work. But if there's any way that this could get merged in before we do any other large effort, that would be, awesome. So
Thanks for sharing. This refactor
Yeah.
gives me warm, fuzzy feelings.
It looks great. Yeah.
all right. There's nothing else on that. I guess we can adjourn and get 5 minutes back.
Thanks.
Thank
Talk to you
you,
later.
everyone.
Have a good day.